Hi everyone. I wanted to go over the Nuremberg Laws of Germany and how history is repeating itself. And I still have my glasses, the avatar. I didn't take them off. Um, these are for all the little stars on the internet and everywhere else. Everybody wants to be a star. Um, so anyway, um, history is repeating itself, but what I've been tracking first, it's the rise of the Fourth Reich from Jen Mars. That I read that, I don't know, at least 8 years ago, and been tracking, I'm like, yeah, duh, okay, been tracking that and how it's been going. But I guess surprised me, because I was always a liberal. I mean, my mother was an alt-right conservative Arizona um, Catholic, well, Catholic who had left the Catholic Church. So luckily, I was spared of going to church when I was young. Um, I don't have a problem with the religious tenets of any, you know, Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, the basic, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and etc. I just have always found the institutions hypocritical, and the more that somebody waves their Bible, usually the worse of a hypocrite they are, at least in my experience. So, um, you know, while listening to this video, because there's quite a few, you can find all sorts of stuff. But what I liked about this woman, let's see, what's her name? Dr. Whitney Bendeck, is she's like, okay, I'm gonna, let's look at this. Well, she says, everything's kind of piecemeal, so let's look at this from a holistic perspective. However, what I want to first do, oops, today, sorry, okay, I got that one. Sorry, the sound. So the Nuremberg laws were a set of institutionalized anti-Semitic and racist statutes enacted in Nazi Germany on September 15th, 1935. So two core statutes: citizenship law stripped German Jews of their citizenship. Um, but it wasn't just the Jews who were targeted. So relegated Jews to the status of subjects of the state without political rights, decreed that only those of German or related blood could be full citizens. The law for, what was it? For the protection of German blood and German honor, banned future marriages and criminalized sexual relations between Jews and Germans, prohibited Jewish households from hiring German maids under the age of 45, forbidden Jews from flying the national flag or displacing Reich colors. Defining who was Jewish. This is another thing. The laws transformed the definition of Jewish identity from a religious designation to a racial classification based on ancestry. Now, this is significant today in that, we've got all sorts of different ethnic groups in the United States, and they've been interbreeding for a long time with all sorts of other groups. So, this is going to take on in the United States. This is not going to just take on a thing against the Jewish populations, but of course, the other minorities, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, um, Hindu. I mean, within the Christians, well, it's going to, with all the Christian groups, it's going to, maybe they'll unite against the others, but then you're going to have infighting amongst them. It's just like amongst the feminists. Oh, they'll unite against a common enemy, but then they scratch each other's eyes out when it's the feminist between them, and you've got the different factions of ethnicity or religion. Believe me, as I said, I mean, my case study in my pending lawsuit against the Institute for Capacity Development at the IMF is a perfect example. I'm like, see how the New Zealander allied with all of these Middle Eastern women who wanted to stick it to the rich white, the privileged white American, and show her who's boss. And I've gotten it everywhere. I mean, the bottom line, because it'll come, I get it from the whites, I get it from the browns, I get it from the blacks, the yellows, the reds. Um, I haven't met any of the greens doing it to me yet, but haven't met any greens. So anyway, it's just the bottom line is bullies want to stay in power, and they use fear and intimidation and violence. I mean, physical and psychological, because of creating chaos with their gaslighting bullshit to keep everybody walking on eggshells so they can rule the roost. And it doesn't matter. That's, all of the different groups, what brings them together is that common goal. All of them in Washington. I mean, the town is infected. Okay, so who were Jews? Jews, anyone with 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents. Change that to Latinos. Who are Latinos? Anyone with 3 or 4 Latino grandparents. Or Irish. Anyone with 3 or 4 Irish Catholic grandparents. Or Canadian. Anyone with 3 or 4 Canadian grandparents. Or, take your pick. Asian. Anyone with 3 or 4 Asian grandparents. I mean, as I say, replace any group you want there, and that'll be targeted, and they are targeted. It just depends. It depends on who's sitting on which side of the fence. Okay, so mixed races. Yeah, so individuals with 1 or 2 grandparents of whatever race or religion or whatever. Divided into first degree and second degree categories based on lineage and affiliation. We'll bring up Marianne Seigart. I've got her family tree. Historical significance and impact, legalized discrimination. They reversed decades of Jewish legal emancipation and integration, opened discrimination directly into German civic life. I mean, I've been showing the affirmative action. I mean, the blog that I wrote, this is over a year old, posted on LinkedIn, how affirmative action, which was started during the Kennedy administration, and one of the architects or participants of that was Gabrielle Betancourt, whose daughter presented herself as presidential candidate in Colombia in 2002. She was uh, kidnapped and held by the FARC for 7 or 8 years, liberated, but she just presented herself again in 2022. Now, I was the president of the French Expat Wife Club when she was launched her campaign, as far as the incoming president. Um, and I was supportive of her because she also has a French nationality. I'm a dual French American. So I was supportive of her, not because she was going to win, but because it was for peace and anti corruption. Well, after she got liberated, she went to Oxford to study human rights. While I'm here in the trenches with all the rats fighting for human rights. And Kerry Kennedy, with her RFK human rights bullshit, is LGBT rights, when in this country, workers have no rights, tenants have no rights, um, citizens have no rights, litigants have no rights, children have no rights. The only ones that appear to have any kind of rights are animals, because of all the wacko animal rights advocates who are with the woke illiberals saying what a wonderful world we live in. Oh my God. Julian Dory, his impersonation of a bleeding heart socialite and the frickin' turtles or something is too precious. Oh my Lord, I loved it. Oh God, precious, precious. Yeah, that's who's ruling the roost in Washington. A bunch of bimbos who are out there screaming for LGBT rights while everybody else is going to shit. And then we have people like Tiffany Justice. I'm like, oh, great, somebody. This is Moms for Liberty. I'm like, great. If you look on the paraphernalia that they pass out and their websites, it all sounds very good. But I'm like, my God, passing out constitutions and all sorts of paraphernalia. I'm like, excuse me, Tiffany Justice, all she wants to do is dance on a podium with Donald Trump, make some money off of her nonprofit, and get a seat over at the Heritage Foundation. And then, I mean, TPUSA, the whole Charlie Kirk assassination, that's exposed a whole Pandora's box. I mean, Megyn Kelly, presumption of innocence, Megyn Kelly. I know Tyler Robinson did it, and he gets the death penalty. I don't want to be there when he's killed. And how do you know do it? Oh, because the FBI, my good buddy Kash Patel over at the FBI, TPUSA, and other people I know in the Trump administration, they said that they are sure that Tyler Robinson did it. But wait a second, Megan. You got a whole bunch of podcasters out there. I mean, these ballistics guy, these Green Berets, apart from Gary Milton, they all think that he's been bought off now. Okay, so, but I mean, there have been a whole bunch of guys. They've been shooting up. They've been shooting at everything that moves. Watermelons, cows' thighs, all sorts of shit. Concrete, showing that there is no frickin' way that gun could have left a little mark on Charlie Kirk's neck. And then you got the police chatter. Somebody's in the car. I mean, look, Megyn Kelly. I mean, you better talk with your good buddy there, Tucker Carlson, because he just came out with a whole expose on the 9/11. I mean, the government has been psyoping everybody forever. You've been drinking too much of that Manhattan Kool-Aid. You know, Fifth Avenue and the Me Too bitches, they've taken that over. I mean, you should be careful of those women because they're not what they appear to be. So you might want to rethink that. What pisses me off so much about Megyn Kelly is that, see, so much the hate crimes that I'm targeted in for representing white dumb bimbo privilege that only cares about being in on the invite list to Martha Vineyard, Palm Beach, and whoever's in the White House. If she happens to come down to DC, of course, because, I mean, DC used to be very provincial compared to the Big Apple. I mean, hell, we've become just as decadent as New York. 80, 90 years ago, 100 years ago, DC was pretty damn boring. I mean, yeah, Nathan's at the corner of Wisconsin and M, and that was about it of the watering holes for these assholes. Oh, you had some underground stuff going on, of course, but not to the extent exposed in the Epstein files. I mean, and all of this has been going on under the watchful eye of Ethel Kennedy and her RFK Human Rights nonprofit. Oh, I mean, it's disgusting the way that that family treated RFK Jr. in his presidential bid. Pure, pure, pure jealousy. And if they had supported him, he'd be in the White House now, not Donald Trump with everybody in their knickers in an uproar. And me scratching my head going, okay, how's he going to do it? He's not leaving. So anyway, I mean, just the idea, oh, Kash Patel told me that that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk. So I'm not going to ask any more questions. I mean, come on. If Kash Patel said it, it must be true. Okay, so see what I'm saying? Change. Because another thing, I mean, look, America first, and look at Trump's administration. Let's see, it's filled with having it all feminist, passing themselves off as trad wives. And they all, I mean, come on. Any of these girls go to work for Trump, you get the Stepford wife makeover right away. Look at any of them. So, yeah, having it all feminist, passing themselves off as trad wives. Epstein sugar babies all over the place, including the First Lady. Let's see, what else you got? Oh, you got lots and lots of foreigners in there. The whole thing is, it's comical, but it's really, really, really dangerous as well. I mean, you gotta laugh or you gotta cry. Okay, so legalized discrimination, precursor to genocide by separating Jews from the rest of German society by law. The Nazi regime made it easier to later enforce economic boycott, forced labor, ghettoization, and ultimately the final solution. One movie with a woman who'd worked in a concentration camp said, well, they didn't intend to originally kill the people. But more and more trainloads of people kept on coming, kept on coming. We didn't have any place to put them or food. So that's how that tradition got started. Um, Broader targeting. The laws were later extended via official interpretations to also apply, see, to Roma, Gypsies, Black people, and their descendants. But they also targeted people with handicapped people, uh, homeless, vagrants. I think there was also maybe like people from psychiatric wards as well were targeted, and academia. Now, after what I've gone out through in the past 20 years with academia, I'm getting to understand why they were targeted as well. And this gets into James Burnham, managerialism, too many chefs spoiling the soup. Everybody wants to be Francis Bacon, uh, Descartes, any of these great thinkers, Socrates, Plato. Well, those were the original ones. But it's mainly, it started with the Enlightenment. And, you have all of these great thinkers. Well, now everybody wants to be a great thinker and nobody wants to be a great worker. I mean, it's nauseating. It's nauseating. All of the PhDs in Washington who believe that they are God's gift to the world and don't have a clue, know how to pass tests and check boxes, but Lord, in their personal lives, bonjour, and screwing up their kids in the process. I mean, all the foreigners should be obligated to register as foreign agents because they're all working and colluding to subvert the U.S. Constitution. And we've got like 17 universities here. Okay, I mean, you have campuses. Some of them are just like in a couple of floors in an office building. But I mean, it's out of control. You've got the big ones. You've got GW, my alma mater. I've got like 6 departments I want to see in court. These are just as bad as all of the nonprofits. It's this whole Ponzi scheme of education. And the prep schools are in there. The Ivy League schools are in there. They're la creme de la creme of conning everybody out of tons of money. So anyway, were academians, I asked, were academians targeted? Yes, they were heavily targeted. Because professors, researchers, and teachers at public universities were classified as state employees. They were among the first groups in Germany to systematically purge and eventually deported. So, I mean, I don't think it was because they were public servants that they were initially targeted, although the public servants, I'm talking about, in the federal government agencies, which in also Congress, all of their staffers. George Santos, he talked about the problem of, for the elected official coming in, his hands are kind of tied from having sold his soul to the donor. But apart from that, from the congressional staffer class, let's call it, these kids. So how you start off, I mean, I came in, somebody I babysat for in Louisiana said, would you like an internship with the senator in DC? I was like, of course. I jumped at the chance. Now, it took me about a year to be like, this guy's in the pocket, everybody. How the thing was run. The congressional members are in the pockets of the lobbyists. But as I point out to all of these snot-nosed brats up on Capitol Hill, we at least were polite to the staffers who came in and answered our mail. I know, because I opened it and helped answer it. So anyway, yeah, the civil servants, they are all party politicking, and all they care about is jobs and more jobs, and that the GDP and more money flows into government coffers in DC so that they can pay off mortgages and party hardy and all of the overpriced restaurants that are here. I mean, it is one huge Ponzi scheme. That's why it doesn't matter who gets voted into office. The permanent class of civil servants here are the ones who rule the roost. And, the secretaries, the lowly secretaries, the security people, they're all just as guilty as all of the ones with the PhDs and the ESQs and all that. And then it's held together by the legal community, who's owned. You have all of these huge global corporate law firms, and there's concentration downtown, K Street. These are all the lobbyists. So they have all of these different departments. They've all embraced DEI. I've been soliciting assistance. One of them is the senator's son that I worked for. He's at Steptoe Johnson. His name's Hunter Johnston. And then another law firm that I've solicited assistance from is Squire Patton Boggs. Now, Tommy Boggs, he's Louisiana. His father, Hale Boggs, Congressman Hale Boggs, came here. Father was killed in, airplane disappeared in Alaska. So his mom becomes Congresswoman first from Louisiana. And he transforms the lobbying business into the scumbag business it is today, while his sister is over at NPR stewing witch's brew for the feminist. NPR, just as bad as Voice of America. See the different factions, they've all been at work for a long time. And Tucker Carlson, I don't know, maybe he doesn't answer my emails because he's still CIA like his father was. Who freaking knows? I don't know. I like Tucker Carlson's, I've used a lot of his videos, his interviews, in my own analysis. But, I'm sick and tired. I've been told by all the preppies and yuppies of yesteryear who have risen to power, and they inundate all of these law firms and lobbyists and are living in $1 million homes, cashing in, ka-ching, ka-ching, while I've been offered up as a sacrificial lamb to atone for the sins of white privilege. I'm like, guys, what happens when your sacrificial lamb says no, I'm not going to go willingly. I'm going to fight you to the death. And you want to send me off to atone for your sins? You're going to atone for your own sins, and your robber baron fortunes are all on the line. It boggles the mind. It boggles the mind how greedy and stupid everybody can be. My favorite is against the Mars candy bar and Mars Sisters. I'm like, with Mars net worth, you could pay off what it obesity costs in healthcare in this country, or diabetes. I forget it's diabetes or obesity. I'm like, okay, little ladies, see, ka-ching, ka-ching, pay. I mean, the sins of the father are revisited on the daughters and the sons and the daughters. Okay, so the Nuremberg Purge, that's 1933, before the Nurembergs were even the laws were even drafted. The Nazi regime shattered Jewish academia, using the law for the restoration of the professional service civil servants. Mass dismissals. Okay, so there were temporary exemptions, but then after a while that was taken away. Impact of the laws. The final, so total ban, erasure of knowledge. Okay, so the regime simultaneously banned the use of research, legal commentaries, or textbooks written by Jewish authors. Academia degrees previously awarded to Jews were later retroactively stripped. So the thing is here, though, look, for example, how Robert Maxwell infiltrated British society and government and commerce. That was with academia, publisher of academia at first. And this was something that was funny because I had kind of the same reaction as Candace Owens. She was going into this in her book club because, with the early religion and the church, I mean, it all, we've always assumed the church in Western society, the Catholic Church, they didn't want, and the upper crust, they didn't want populations reading in order to be able to oppress them. But it was interesting because kind of in the scriptures, the word, the truth is God, and everybody else, the moment that you start having printed and having these peoples, it's no longer just a thought that's there, it's a thought that's in black and white, and therefore forever. And, it can be bad thoughts. And so, that this shouldn't be allowed. So, and Candace and Isaiah, we have the same reaction. Wait a second. I'm a big promoter on reading and everything, but there's something to be said for this. You go and you look out in the publishing world, the misinformation, there is more misinformation and lies that are published than the truth. I've been trying to find a publisher for my book, The Mommy Wars, between the feminists, anti-feminists, and the socialites for years and years. But nobody wants to touch the subject of aggression and competition between women. The few who have written about it, Tripping the Prom Queen, Susan Shapiro-Barash is one of them. Phyllis Chesler is another. She was raped by her boss at the UN in 1978, but was convinced by her colleagues that she shouldn't complain or, go through a process against him because it would be discrimination because he was black and she's white. He's dead now. White. She's Jewish. She was married to a Afghan Muslim and apparently abused. And, she's the typical story of, I came back to America at academia. She met him in college. She's got like 18 books and counting. And, once again, one more of these academians who I want to see in court. I'm like, wait a second, y'all are sitting in your ivory towers about women's rights, human rights, children's rights, uh, the problems in the courts, and you denigrate and you treat like second class citizens the victims of the courts. Well, you sit there and schmooze and cruise with the frickin', government authorities that you should be calling out. I mean, it was disgusting. I saw what the game was when I was in Spain. I've been down to this nonprofit several times, Mujeres Separadas y Divorciadas. They're supposed to be women's rights, all of that stuff. I kept on going down there. I'm like, stop giving me pamphlets, and reading me my rights and all of this bullshit. I need a lawyer who is going to assist me instead of stabbing me in the back every time I turn around. And they kept on saying, no. I mean, everybody will tell you can't recommend any lawyers. There aren't any that know what the frick they're doing. Oh, great. So then I finally meet with the head of it, Carmen something, I forget her name. Unfortunately, she'll probably be dead before I can get her into court. And I go into her office and meet, and she's like giving me her spiel. And I'm looking and I'm seeing all of her photos shaking hands with the different ministers. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, at least now I know what I'm up against here. That's probably why I survived. Amnesty International said I had 1/4% chance of survival. And when I made it out alive and got to the United States, I thought I'd come here and everybody would be horrified. Oh, no. The other victims turned activists said, welcome to the club. It's going on everywhere. And nobody will do anything. So they've created a pretty pickle. Oh, it's targeting of students. We've already seen this starting, but it's once again, a lot of these students are coming in to intentionally create chaos in the country. Either because le da la gana and they're on some power trip and ego trip of, oh yeah, I'm going to come and get book deals and have everybody kiss my ass, so I'll do and say anything I want. Yeah, it's gotten so out of control. So deportation and the Holocaust. So forced migration, deportation to camps. See, the problem is forced migration. Yeah, renowned thinkers such as Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud escaped Germany. Marianne Seigardt, her great-great-grandmother, or I guess it was her great-grandmother, one of the reasons she made it out was apparently Einstein like mentored her or whatever, helped her. That assistant, yeah, okay, so see, it was probably through this. There were assistance council established in the UK to help rescued scholars find placement abroad. Her mom, she was a medical doctor, I believe. But other branches of her family weren't so lucky and were exterminated in the Holocaust. However, here, let's just finish this. The role of non-Jewish academics. Crucially, German universities did not widely protest these actions. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum documents that the vast majority of non-Jewish universities, professors, administrators, and student unions actively participated in or quietly cooperated with the ouster of their Jewish colleagues to advance their own careers or align with Nazi racial ideologies. Of course, the universities, all of these academians, all they care about is getting tenure and their paychecks and pensions, and it's all a big mess. Too many chefs spoil the soup. So as I said, Marianne Seigart, now she's here, which she went to Cobham Hall, my alma mater, early life. I know it's in here. Her father and parents were divorced when she was 2. She was raised Catholic. As his maternal grandfather, Rudy Seigart Singer, had converted from Judaism. This did not prevent them from being persecuted by the Nazis. Thus, he and his mother fled to Switzerland and then England. I know it has someplace in here. Career, personal life. Huh, okay. Well, I know she's on Cobham Hall thing. See, this is my thing with all of these exclusive prep schools that the Spanish courts claim are school for juvenile delinquents. That's in my divorce decree. Okay, yeah, shall we take a look? Are these all juvenile delinquents? Maybe so. So anyway, where is she? Marianne Seigart, I know she's here some there. She's down at the bottom. So anyway, my favorite with her, we have quite a few. There are several of the journalists. Alex Crawford, a British journalist. Now our paths did cross when I was there, based in Turkey. She's from Africa. Her mother was Chinese, I believe, and her father British. Grew up in, I forget, it was Rhodesia or Namibia. Journalist and broadcaster, Annabel Heseltine. So her father was a government and other English journalists. I mean, all of these journalists should be ashamed of themselves. This is another one of my favorite from Foxcross. Isabel dos Santos, an Angola businesswoman, the eldest child of Angola's former president and billionaire businesswoman. No, but she's like, I think, in hiding now. I think she was someplace in the Middle East in hiding because all of her assets have been frozen, and she's been Interpol, I think, has an arrest warrant for her. See, these are the respectable schools. What's another one of my favorites? Annabelle Nielsen. She was a British fashion model, and she was Alexander McQueen's muse. Oh, the poor girl. She was viciously beaten and raped. I mean, almost killed when she was young, and then she ended up, I don't know if she was taken out. Not really positive. She could have been killed instead of, because they said with her, I think she died like of a heart attack, but really, really young. I mean, she was doing a lot of drugs, so I don't know, but kind of suspicious. See, the thing is they want all of these bimbos who won't ask any questions. So where's her book? The Authority Gap. Oh, where's her book? The Authority Gap. Oh, now she runs the Authority Gap Consultancy, which helps organizations narrow and close their authority gaps. Oh, God. Yeah. Why women, the Authority Gap, why women are still taken less seriously than men and what we can do about it. I'm like, Marianne, all of y'all would start behaving seriously then you would be taken seriously. And I mean, it's this precisely this kind of parasite on society that pissed off the Germans so much, because as you'll see, it was a result of the crash of 29, of which her great-great-great-grandfather was responsible in Vienna. So let's take a listen here.
Well, I have the task of kind of prepping us for where we're going to be going later, which is the Holocaust Museum. So I'm going to start by looking at what was going on in Germany in the 1930s, and then I'll switch slides and move over to one that's just really a timeline narrative of the Holocaust. And the reason I do this is because when I was in school myself, I feel like I always learned the Holocaust in bits and pieces. I learned it in themes, I learned it in this here and there, and I did not understand how everything fit together. And so it was actually kind of confusing to me what was what led to what. And so I try to remedy that in my own classes, kind of give that sense of context. So here, again, we'll be looking at a bit of historical context. We've already seen earlier why history is so important, helps us to understand these things. And then to build off of what we were just learning about. So we were just learning about well, actually, you started in the context of it's odd, in a way, that the Holocaust, the epicenter for this is Germany, considering that you have this rich Christian tradition, both the Protestants and the Catholics. Another thing that's odd is that when you look at Germany, the Jews were largely assimilated there. So Germany, Western Europe, you have high degrees of assimilation for the Jewish population. Now, when we talk about the historic, ghettos and Jewish quarters, you're tending to talk about either previous times in history or Eastern Europe, not Germany in the 1900s. But one thing Germany was not immune to was anti-Semitism. Now, we just learned about religious anti-Semitism. What other kinds were there? Okay, racial, and I'm going to say that one for last. Okay, political. Anybody else? What's that?
Academic.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, sure. I can certainly see it fitting in the academic realm. Anywhere else? Economic. We talked about money lending, usury. Right? Popular, kind of traditional. It's how it's always been, passed down generation.
Yeah, now the money lending usury stuff is very much more at the root cause of the racism that Jews have experienced, because it put them into a favorable position within the banking systems, because the Christians weren't allowed to charge interest. So they got their foothold there, and ever since they've continued to have their be a part of that. And when we keep on going through these boom and bust economies, people get pissed off at them. We find a high concentration in banking, but also in like entertainment and communications. Now, in my book, The Mommy Wars, I get into the historical context and how that developed. And you can see kind of the same thing with the Roma people. Part of the problem, part of the issue, was that these were migratory populations. That's what Israel was supposed to be about. Oh, we'll give them a nation, and then problems will be solved. Well, obviously that didn't happen.
From generations, what you were taught to believe, so that's what you believe. There are multiple different types of anti-Semitism. So they all kind of come together. But in the 1800s, we have the development of racial anti-Semitism. And this is the one that I wanted to talk about just a little bit before we go into this, because this is going to be the most dangerous form of it. With religious anti-Semitism, a Jew could convert. They could become a Christian. Thus, they could lose their Jewishness. Sometimes that was forcible conversion, but they could convert, and then they were no longer a Jew. They could change their practices if it's economic. People could maybe become more enlightened and move beyond those prejudices that they had been taught, right? Racial anti-Semitism is going to be a bit different. It comes in the context of the 1800s, and so interestingly, prior to this, and tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the evolution of international human rights. When the French Revolution broke out, the French passed what's known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. And that is going to recognize very wide-sweeping and inalienable rights of all human beings. But we have a problem. Now, by the way, my colleague Hussein also talked about Napoleon, the Napoleonic Wars. As the French moved across Europe, they brought those tenets of the rights of man with them.
Okay, just in case anybody hasn't noticed, same things were going on the other side of the pond at the same time.
All over Europe, including the German states, imposed these ideas. So they became well known. But we have a problem in the 1800s because this is also the time of imperialism, colonization. So now we've had these ideas come about that all people are equal and all people have rights, and yet we also have colonization going on, so how do you justify it? And the development of pseudoscience really fits into this context, and it gave a justification because races weren't equal. Some were inferior, some were superior. And of course the white race, and in many writings, the Aryans in particular, were identified as a superior race. Well, now that gives a justification for either helping to, I don't know, enlighten inferior populations or subjugate them, whatever that may look like. But the pseudoscience plays into this. Now, the pseudoscience is also where you have your anti-Semitic scholars going to definitely zero in on the Jews, and the Jews would be identified as an inferior race. And those writings became incredibly virulent. You look at the language of them. I mean, they weren't just nasty. They went beyond that, calling the Jews parasites, calling the Jews viruses, calling to exterminate. It was rhetoric in the 1800s. Nobody was really acting on it. It was rhetoric. But remember when you were a kid and your parents taught you, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt you? That's not true. Because what happens is that language impacts.
Well, I think that, it was just rhetoric in the 1800s. I think she's missing some stuff there, but let's go on.
Thinking. Language is dangerous. And so when you have this 1800 pseudoscience, which leads to this incredibly anti-Semitic rhetoric, and that's not to say that it didn't exist before, but it takes on that scientific element, you start looking at this incredibly dehumanizing language, and the problem is you hear this for decades and decades, and finally in the 1930s, 1940s, this is going to become more than rhetoric. But then you have populations who've been primed. So keep in mind, language matters. The things we say, how we speak about people matters. So that's just a little lesson there. One of the things that really made racial anti-Semitism the most dangerous of the forms is that you can't become not a Jew. You can't convert, and then you're not a Jew. You can't change your practices, and then you're not considered a bad guy. If you are a Jew by race, that's who you are. Now, by the way, that who you are is an important term when we talk about the definition of genocide. Not where you live, not what you believe, not what you think, not what you did, who you are. That's something you can't change. And that's what's going to make this one so dangerous. And then that's the context, too, when we look at the Nazis. Sure, you can see multiple elements of anti-Semitism in here, but Adolf Hitler would definitely adhere to the racial anti-Semitism. He considered the Jews a race. So this is coming from that racial anti-Semitism. By the way, the outline is for Dominique. She apparently missed being in my classes, and she wanted an outline. So she got an outline. You're welcome. All right, so brief little background. Again, I don't like starting in the middle of a story because I don't want to assume you all know the story. A lot of what I tell you today, you've probably heard. Some of you may know all of it. Some of you may know quite a lot of it, so it may just be a refresher, but I don't want to start in the middle of the story. So just wanted to start really with the Nazis coming to power. So 1920s really wasn't looking too good for the Nazis. They tried to carry out a coup, the beer hall putsch, didn't work. That convinced Hitler and the leadership that they needed to come to power legally. And what you see here is just a diagram of the number of seats the Nazis would get in the Reichstag. And you've got a difference here. Only 12 seats in 1928. 230 seats, which didn't give them a majority, but it did mean they were the party that got the most number of votes in 1932. That's a big jump in numbers. What happened? What happened between 28 and 32? The Great Depression happened. The Weimar Republic, which was the government of Germany post-World War I, had become more stable, gotten its feet on the ground. Things were going reasonably okay for them until the Great Depression. And because of loans between the US and Germany, Germany was hit really hard, really fast. And it was that context that suddenly gave the Nazis the in. Suddenly, Hitler is able to start appealing to the people, and we see the Nazis rise in the number of seats that they're getting through elections. And so that means by 1932, the Nazis get the most number of seats in the Reichstag. At this point, various conservative powers come together and agree, or parties come together and agree, all right, we don't really like this guy, Adolf Hitler, he's a little weird, but he'll be temporary. We'll go ahead and support him becoming Chancellor of Germany. He's not going to be around all that long, so it doesn't matter. January 30th, 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg, who is the president of the Weimar regime, will appoint Adolf Hitler Chancellor. I like this photo. Tell me what you see. Beyond Hindenburg and Hitler, but what do you see in it? Yeah. Look at the difference between the two men. I mean, Hindenburg was a big man, but he's standing there, tall, strong, shaking Hitler's hand, and Hitler is what? He's meek. He's demure. He's got his head down. He's playing a role. He knew what people thought about him. He knew that they assumed he would be temporary, that they could manipulate him until another chancellor could be appointed. By the way, why would they think another chancellor would be appointed? This is 1933. The Weimar Republic had been in power about 14 years, Adolf Hitler was the 16th chancellor. Nobody stayed in that position long. Some months. Rarely was it years. This turned over rapidly. And so when Adolf Hitler became chancellor, nobody thinks this guy's around to stay. It was really politically turbulent time, so all bets were he was going to be a goner really soon. Hitler knows all of this. When we talk about Adolf Hitler, we talk about how evil he was. We talk about a lot of things about him which were all true. But one thing not to miss in your understanding about Hitler is that he was...
Okay, now the thing is, Hitler, evil, it's all true. I mean, Hitler was a dictator like all the others. Mussolini, Franco. This is all going on at the same time. I mean, we got the Turks, and I understand, the young Turks, I'm talking about the podcasters. I understand how upset Kasparian. I think it's just, I'm not sure if he's Turkish, I believe. She's Armenian. So yeah, the Armenian genocide, there were atrocities going on, and it was that this was across Europe. This wasn't just, to keep on Hitler, bad Hitler is to miss the whole point.
Politically savvy.
Not to justify anything that went on in the Holocaust, but stop. This has just opened the door for the Jews in the aftermath. And I mean, Washington is filled with them, New York, Manhattan is filled with them. And who's going to get the blame? Everybody. But also, I'm pissed off because all of the ruling elite I know on both sides of the pond. And I know in people Arizona, Louisiana, Florida, Virginia, well, New York as well, through Foxcroft and Column Hall. I know them all over the place. Everybody's canceled me. I'm like, excuse me, you people. Marie Antoinette ended up with getting her head shot off like this. So, and the issue is everybody just wants to follow the lead of the Marie Antoinettes. And Wallace Simpson, Susie Guest, Cornelia Guest, her daughter, all this elitism and narcissism and entitlement. And people are getting pissed off with the boom and bust economies it's producing.
He was an incredibly smart man where this was concerned. He understood the system. He understood how to manipulate the system, and that's what he would do. That's why he ends up being as successful as he was, because he figured out how to manipulate the system. So here he is.
Sound like anybody knows?
Example of his manipulation. He's appointed chancellor. Nobody thinks he's going to be around long. Very quickly, he and the Nazi Party began taking steps that will establish their complete power. Now, when he became chancellor, he inherited something that helped him. Article 48 had been put in place in 1930, after the Great Depression broke out. At that time, the Germans were really concerned about the communists, that the communists were going to take advantage of the political problems, and this would be the communist opportunity to rise. Chancellors were given the authority to act outside of the Constitution by Article 48. Hitler inherited Article 48. So that means when he came to power, he already had the ability to act outside of the constitutional confines of the Weimar regime. He would use that. It's not even a solid month later, but by the end of February 27th, the Reichstag caught on fire. They blamed the communists. Scholars believe the Nazis were in one way, shape, or form.
Now, the World Tower, 9/11 is the Reichstag. You trace what's been going on. And you look at the trajectory, how shall I say, the trends and the parallels of trends.
Behind
and
this Reichstag.
Tactics used. I mean, MK Ultra, even Stalin, everybody admired Hitler for his propaganda campaigns. And everybody's been using it ever since. The American press and communication systems, and it's on the internet with the podcasters now, been based on the same model.
Fire. But that will then be used. Remember, we've got these emergency powers. That's going to be used to issue a decree. It's famously known as the Reichstag Fire Decree, but it has a longer name, the Protection of the People and the State. But I put here what it did. Now notice, this is the next day. That's awfully fast. Imagine if our government got legislation out so quickly. This is the next day. It suspended all fundamental freedoms of press, or speech, press, assembly, freedom from invasion of privacy, mail, telephone, telegram, from house search without warrant, gave the federal government the power to take over the state governments as needed to restore public security, and impose the death penalty in place of what had been life imprisonment for treason, arson, railroad sabotage, and the like. I love these words, and the like. What does that mean? And treason, who gets to define that? Take a guess. All right, so we have this decree. Now, there's a bigger importance to this than simply the new government is taking advantage of its powers and really staging events to be able to take steps further. Look at all the loss of rights here. I want you to understand this applied to all Germans. This isn't an anti-Semitic legislation. This applies to everybody. So one thing I want you to think about, and we can talk about tomorrow, why didn't people do more? Keep in mind what happens when all your rights are stripped away. So this removes all of those rights from everybody, and most of the time we don't talk about the fact that everybody really lost their protections. All right, so we have the Reichstag Fire Decree. The very next month, Hitler, manipulating the Reichstag, is going to be able to pass the Enabling Act. They used a little persuasion, they used a little coercion, they used a little bribery, they threw people in prison, they did all kinds of things, but ultimately, on March 23rd, 1933, the Enabling Act was passed. The Enabling Act, and again, long term here, the law for removing the distress of the people in the Reich. What this does is it's going to give the Nazis essentially permanent authority to act outside of the Constitution. It was supposed to be for about a 4-year period. Well, we know the rest of that story. There will be no more Reichstag. With this, the Reichstag voted themselves out of existence. There will be no more Reichstag. Now the Nazis can rule by their own accord outside of the Constitution for this given time period. By July of 1933, all parties in Germany had been suspended except for the Nazi Party. It was the only one to still be legal. And Hitler made this statement, the party has now become the state. Look at how quickly that happened. With a chancellor that people thought was kind of weird, a bit eccentric, a nobody, not going to last very long. Within 6 months, had taken full control of Germany, and I will point out, he did it legally. Another soapbox moment, be careful which freedoms you're willing to give away. There are always a lot of talks about the Constitution and this and that, and I'm always shocked at how quickly a lot of people are willing to give away freedoms. Don't ever give your freedoms away. Germany gives us a really good example of what happens when you hand your freedoms over. All right, but by July 1933, it was just the Nazi Party, and I just said this part, but this was a legal revolution, which serves as a warning to us. All right, now, we've seen how the Nazis came to power. Our topic here, though, is looking at the 1930s and the implementation of these anti-Semitic policies and legislation. Again here, I'll point out that Hitler was savvy. He was very eager to have the support of the German people. He was very concerned about popular movements against him. Actually, he wanted the people to adore him. He was careful not to do too much too fast. When he spoke, he was careful about who his audience was in terms of what he said. You may say, didn't everybody know how anti-Semitic it was? Well, he didn't spew all that in every speech he gave. So he was careful in playing up to his audience in order to gain support. After the Nazis came to power, initially their measures were really against the communists and other political enemies, and it takes a little while before they start very specifically targeting the Jews. Now, you did have some Jews who were arrested in these early months as political enemies, but it takes until April that we start seeing the anti-Semitic policies going into place. It started off actually with what was intended to be this major and permanent boycott to go into effect on April 1st of 1933. This was to boycott the Jewish businesses. Hitler hoped that there would be widespread support for this. Turns out there wasn't. Also turns out that word of the Nazi Party's anti-Semitic beliefs was getting out. Word of those individuals who had been arrested in terms of being political enemies was getting out. This man, Rabbi Stephen Weiss, who was the head of the American Jewish Congress in New York City, was making a real big stink about it here in the United States, calling attention to what was happening. And so this was starting to put a little bit more international focus and pressure on Germany. So the result was that April 1st boycott ended up being only April 1st, which was Saturday, the Sabbath, so a lot of Jewish businesses weren't open anyway. But what was supposed to be permanent ended up being just one day. All right, this is going to be followed just days later, really, with the first anti-Jewish law. And this one, like all of them, have these long names, but the law for the reestablishment of the professional service. Well, what does reestablishment mean? Well, they're Aryanizing it, trying to get rid of the Jews and make sure that this is only for Aryans. So the result was you would have Jews being kicked out of the civil professions, so judges, jurors, assessors, things of the sort. Jews who worked in the entertainment industry, they're out. It would impact education. A Jew's ability to go to university was limited to almost nothing at this point. Jewish children would now have to go to Jewish schools. Remember what I said about how assimilated the Jewish population was? So now you're removing children who may not even consider themselves to be Jews to a separate education, starting to separate, ostracize. So we see this impact education. Jews weren't supposed to farm land because the land was for the Germans. Whole series of things go into effect, and it took about 6 months or so for all of these measures to be put in place. But I will say here, on April 11th, they also worked to define what they meant by non-Aryan. So at this point, they're identifying if you have, I think at that point they were saying 2, maybe it was 3 as well, but 2 or 3 Jewish grandparents, then you were a Jew. So we see an early attempt to identify who they're actually talking about, who was non-Aryan, specifically who was a Jew in this context. So throughout 1933, it was very clear that life for the Jews in Germany was going downhill. So what's their response? What do? What do you think? What would you do?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Any of those Israelites, did they have the authority, well, not authority maybe, but did they have the power to leave Germany?
Yes, about 53,000 of them did. However, about 16,000 came back. So the total number for 1933 was 37,000 Jews left Germany. All right, so that's one thing they could do. They could leave. If life wasn't good in Germany, they could leave. 37,000 left. However, then we do have to start asking, well, where do they go? Leaving's easier said than done. And keep in mind, we're talking 1930s, not today. You know, picking up and leaving, where are you going to get a job? How are you going to take care of yourself? I mean, these are big questions today. This would be even more difficult in those particular times. So we do know.
I don't know why it's more difficult in that time than in this time. I'm not sure exactly why she comes at that conclusion.
No, a fair number of Jews did leave. But then, oh, thank you. There were other Jews that maybe weren't as concerned. Because remember, initially everybody thought there's no way Adolf Hitler was going to stay in power long. None of the chancellors were lasting more than months, a year or two at best. So many Jews at the time thought, okay, this is a temporary hardship. We'll get through this. Historically, as a Jewish population, they knew bad times. This is part of their collective memory. There are good times and bad. This is one of the bad. We'll hunker down. We'll get through it. And so while we might think, because we're looking at this with hindsight, while we might think that this would be the writing on the wall, mass immigration, with an E, of Jews out of Germany, it's not really what happened at this particular time. And even though life was getting bad, not everybody saw really where this was going. All right, 1934. It's kind of quiet. Really nothing major is going on, and that probably would have added to a sense of, okay, it's not getting worse. You know, we can handle this. He's still in power, but it's not getting worse, so we really don't have any major events that are occurring in 1934 as far as any sort of new legislation is concerned. But one thing did happen in 1934 that would be ominous for the Jews. On August 3rd, 1934, President Hindenburg died. He was the last vestige of the Weimar Republic. I mean, he really, as president, was all that was left. When he died, forget the Enabling Act having a time period on it. All that's over. The Weimar Republic's over. Now you have the Third Reich. Now you have Hitler as the Führer. Now he's the commander-in-the-chief of the military. So now Hitler's holding all of these positions of power. No more democracy, no more Weimar Republic, all that's over. And that's going to be ominous for the Jews because Hindenburg had actually offered a bit of support and protection for the Jews, especially the Jews who had served in the military. So when I talked about the policies that went into place in 1933, I didn't say anything about the Jews in the military. That's because Hitler couldn't mess with those Jews because Hindenburg was still around. He's your World War I general, hero, right? They had his protection. Now they don't. 1935. The Jews will be kicked out of the military. Now I always say I'm a big picture thinker. There's more of a big picture here. 1935, something else big happened. This was the year that Hitler announced Germany would begin rearming. Now, if you know your history, you get why that was important. If you don't know your history, the reason why that's such a big deal is that Germany was prevented from rearming by terms of the Versailles Treaty, which is what concluded World War I for Germany. The terms of that had vastly limited Germany's army. They could not rearm. In 1935, Hitler announced that they would. This was in complete defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. So the fact that the Jews were kicked out of the military the same year, coincidence? No. As the Nazis were going to begin building up their military, which they would simultaneously begin preparing for war, the Jews were not part of that. All right, so we have that. Now, we move forward a number of months. We get to September. And in September, we get the very well-known Nuremberg Laws. September 15th is when these come out. And there's really two components to what is initially promulgated here on September 15th. First is the Reich citizenship law. That was very straightforward. To be a citizen, you have to be German, meaning Aryan. Okay, so that one's short and sweet. If you want to be a citizen of Germany, you have to be a German, which means you have to be Aryan. Then, this is followed with the law for the protection of German blood and German honor. This would forbid Jews from marrying Aryans. This would forbid sexual intercourse between Jews and Aryans. Jews were also not allowed to employ a female servant or maid in their home under the age of 45. Why? Because she would be of childbearing years. But again, we have the problem of, well, who's a Jew? And so in November, we get clarification on this. So we get the Mischling law. Mischling means mixed blood. Now here it's made clear, a Jew is anybody with 3 Jewish grandparents. But beyond that, maybe you're a half Jew, or you're a quarter Jew, or you're 1/8 Jew. So it broke down in all of these different categories, all these different levels of Jewishness based on how many grandparents you had, or were you born of a union between a Jew and a non-Jew, or a Jew and an Aryan, and yet you had been raised Aryan. Now, if you were raised Jewish, you were a Jew, period. No discussion on that. But if you were born of a union between a Jew and an Aryan, but you were raised Aryan, well, then maybe you would be okay. Maybe you could be put into this Mischling, this mixed blood category, and could be considered okay. By the way, they did have plans to sterilize the Mischlinge. So that was part of the thought process down the road, sterilize these people who have Jewish blood in them so that they can't pass on Jewish blood in the future. Here, though, we actually do see that Hitler was still being pragmatic because there were others who were helping to draft these laws who were a little bit more extreme than him, at least at that time, in terms of how they were categorizing Jews. Some wanted to say if there were any Jewish blood whatsoever, they should automatically be denied everything. Hitler was concerned about upsetting the Aryan population. He was he was concerned about doing anything that could bring about negative attention or any sort of a popular movement against him. So he was still being a bit more pragmatic, if you will, in how he was looking at this, at least how he was categorizing it legally. Now, this is one of those big moments in history, and we always look back at this moment because this is when the Jews lost their citizenship. And for us, again, we're looking at it with hindsight. It's 2020. We know exactly where it's going. We know what this is leading to. And so in our minds, this is kind of that moment when we're wondering, why aren't the Jews doing anything? You know, do they realize? So let me start with the Jewish response. What is the Jewish?
One has to ask themselves if the minorities in this country are realizing, because they're certainly not doing anything.
Response to this?
Well, that's not true. They're digging in deeper and deeper into their woke liberalism and their affirmative action and DEI, which is, I can assure you, is not dead and buried. Until we go after the HR people, that's not going to be dead and buried. And DEI actually means discrimination, elimination or extermination, and intimidation. And you know, I got anybody who's known me in my lifetime can attest. No, I'm not racist. I'm not, I'm a liberal, live and let live. But I'm also, what shall I say? I'm more conservative in my personal lifestyle. So, my mother might not agree on that one. We won't go into that. But anyway, the left is just antagonizing. The perfect example is Kerry Kennedy with the Robert F. Kennedy human rights. Now, Ethel Kennedy started this thing 1968, just months after her husband was assassinated, in order to serve as a piggy bank because she was not a wealthy widow. And if she wanted to keep up her party hardy lifestyle, she needed the funds to do so. And this is how the RFK Human Rights nonprofit was started. Now, at this time, Washington does not have 58,000 nonprofits. Uh, Charity work, nobody's going to bust Ethel Kennedy's chops. I don't know how much she was getting, but I'm sure it was, well, we're not going to leave the poor widow of RFK out in the cold, and this provides her with an income. Even though Bobby Kennedy, she had a meltdown. I mean, she and my mother were, see, my mother looked like Jackie O, but she behaved like Ethel Kennedy. Very, very abusive. Cher Denise reads an Oppenheimer book. Oh no, no, it's not Oppenheimer. Is it Oppenheimer who does the books on? I forget. But anyway, Cher Denise does a book review on a book about Ethel that tells you about how Ethel was abusive. But Bobby Kennedy said that her treatment of her staff and her children were at odds with her human rights activism work. Yeah. And a real hypocrite. And that she saw the world as friend versus foe and was a fair weather friend. And yeah, that fair weather friend, welcome to the cancel culture and its naissance. I mean, okay, can't totally blame Ethel Kennedy on that, but she had her hand in that. The Kennedy women, I mean, all of the Astors and the Vanderbilts, the robber barons, the Kennedys just wanted to be aspired to be like the Astors and Vanderbilts, just like Trump, just like Cornelia Guest and her mother, and all of the Capote swans. This concentration of elitism and wealth and imperialism, that took its roots after its last vestige of hope died with the assassination of RFK. And that was the reason he was taken out. There are many, many parallels, but there are many, many parallels between the JFK assassination and the RFK assassination and the Charlie Kirk assassination. I know Bobby Kennedy is, he's at the head of HHS, so kind of, I wouldn't advise him to get in. Let's just say, Bobby Kennedy, I got this one right now. I've been in the middle of that. I've been absolutely horrified at Megyn Kelly's response. I mean, really, everybody's response to Erica Kirk. I mean, everybody who's like, oh yeah, she's a grieving widow. She's a grieving widow. You know who are the most critical of Erica Kirk? Are widows. Yeah. They're like, excuse me, I've been through that, and that woman is not grieving. We got all sorts of different flavors for the grieving widow. That's not one of them. So let's go back here.
I'll make sure I have my number right. But before, we had 37,000 people leave. Where do I have that page? Yeah, 37,000 Jews left in 1933. 21,000 left after the Nuremberg Laws, or 1935 in general. You would think it'd be higher. So 21,000, less than 1933. Why might the Jews not have been as alarmed by this as you think?
You're used to oppression in Europe,
yeah.
the latest to alarm.
History. This is nothing new. Throughout time, they have had rights, lost rights. They've had citizenship, lost citizenship. When Napoleon came through, he forced the German states to grant the Jews all these pervasive rights. After the French left, out with all that. I mean, for the Jews, they're used to this. It has gone back and forth throughout history. Again, as a people with a collective memory, they know they've had these bad times before. So here they're thinking, well, this isn't great, but you know what? Subjects still have protection under the law. And in fact, these laws actually made it
Yeah, well, tell me any group throughout history who hasn't had bad times. That's what everybody's got to stop playing the victim card, take a look in the mirror, and buck it up and move forward. You know, if you really want to implement and have human rights and democracies and implement constitutions and stuff, yeah, this has got to stop. Playing the victim card, I mean, I have no patience for that. When I got in the whole frickin' mess in Spain, I mean, shit, I was scared, yeah. I'm not as scared of anybody, you know, in a debate. But I'm not stupid. You put me up against a man twice my size and twice my weight. Well, excuse me, twice my weight, not twice my size, but twice my weight. And in a fury. Yeah, no, that's not a fair fight. That's not a fair fight by any standards. And anybody who suggests, well, it is what it is a freaking coward. Let's put them in the ring. Huh? Oh. So, and I mean, I was just all of these places that I was going to, you know, there's all Centro de Género, these domestic violence, you know, and all of these different nonprofits. And since being back, oh, anda, no llores, don't cry, little girl. I'm like, get the fuck away from me. I just want someone who's going to defend my rights. I don't want a shoulder to cry on. Believe me, I've seen too much of that shit in my lifetime. People trying to, you know, get sympathy and play sympathy. I have no patience for it. Have I had a wonderful life? And the best part has been my two sons. And I would go through hell and back for them. I thank God for them every single day. And like everybody, good times, hard times. And I'm just thankful that out of everybody in this world, I can consider myself lucky. But that doesn't mean that anybody should target me as payback for something that I didn't do.
Down, like they would still have some value in society, that they would still be protected in some way in society, so they could hold on to that. Well, you know, they weren't expelled, they still had rights of subjects and so forth, so they don't see what we're able to see with hindsight informing us of where this is going. But what about the international community? So yeah, when we look at this, we often wonder, well, what was the international community doing? What was their response? Well, first you've got the Great Depression. So keep in mind, 1930s, the economies from the United States across Europe aren't so great. So the idea now of just taking in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever it may be, of people really doesn't sound very appealing to countries that are facing dire economic problems, struggling to get out of them. So we can't forget that the Great Depression was going on, and we have this economic turmoil that's being felt across the globe. Well, let's not act like anti-Semitism wasn't an issue either, because you also have anti-Semitism across Europe, in the United States. So anti-Semitism exists. We've talked about the fact that there's multiple different levels of that. But you have people who maybe wouldn't have been so friendly to accepting Jews in particular. What about the United States? I often feel like students will say, yeah, but the United States, we should have done something. All right, well, this applied to us as well. This is the time of the New Deal, you know, United States trying to get things back in place. One thing we can forget historically is we weren't the world's major power at that time. We didn't want to be the world's major power at that time. We had the opportunity after World War I.
Okay, I don't know if she's going to go into this, but let me just cut it off there. No, the real reason, the industrialists in the United States had been making a fortune. Joe Kennedy was involved in all of that. That's how he became ambassador to Britain. Joe Kennedy made his fortune on Wall Street. In fact, he was one of the few who didn't lose his fortune. And as the story goes, because he listened to a shoeshine boy. I keep on telling that story to the people who work in the Federal Reserve in the building where I serve them their lunch. Uh, you may laugh at me that a cashier is sitting here giving y'all advice, all of you PhDs and all of you bigwig and six-figure salary guys, and I'm sitting here giving my elevator speech every day, giving my spiel. You might think I'm a little bit crazy, but guess what? Joe Kennedy, he didn't lose his shirt because he listened to his shoeshine boy. You might just want to listen to the cashier, because guess what? They stuck me in the kitchen because they want to shut me up. Because guess what? I got almost as much education as you do, buddy. Okay. Well, yeah, I've done my thesis in terms of thesis, doctoral thesis, independent researcher. I mean, I'm not doing it for any diplomas. Oh, I got at least a couple dozen out there. Screw y'all. Screw all of the academians out there. Screw them. I mean, Joan Meyer of DV Leap, Legal Empowerment, whatever, of George Washington University, and George Washington University, my alma mater. They're like at the lead of the ones that I want to see in court. Ooh, the econ department. It is criminal how they're in bed with the World Bank and the IMF. Now, GW is right next in Washington. You have GW, we get Foggy Bottom, GW, the IMF, the World Bank, the old executive office building. This Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House, and then the Treasury. I mean, I keep on saying, I'm working in the highest concentration within like a 20-block radius. I'm working the highest concentration of white-collar criminals probably of anywhere in the world. And everybody's laughing all the way to the bank.
One to step up. We didn't. Why? Because we didn't want to. We didn't want to be involved in Europe's affairs. We went home. We talk about isolationism, right? So it wasn't us. If anybody was still kind of in that position, it was Britain. So that wasn't us. That's not the role we were playing at that time. And then one other aspect.
Britain was only concerned because they had lost the advantage in the Industrial Revolution. We were cashing in, and they were concerned about Germany coming invading them. See, nobody gave a shit about the Jews.
The United States. Else. We know our history. Were things equal here? No. So who are we to point a finger at Germany and say, you're not going to allow the Jews to have full rights? Hello? I mean, look at what was going on in the United States at the time. We have segregation. We have Jim Crow. We have all that. Who are we to point the finger at Germany? So we have an international community that for various reasons wasn't stepping up to the plate. Many, again.
Yeah, see, why we didn't do it. We differ on the reasons.
And we also have to acknowledge nobody knew where this was going. So the world knew about what was going on in Germany, but, bad times, they'll get through it. Didn't seem so alarming. What about the German people?
The thing is that she would skip this over. And this was the defense of the defendants in the Nuremberg trials. There were no laws that made what Germany was doing at the time, or the Nazi Party, or anybody, any of the government officials in Germany. There were no laws. They were making the laws, but internationally, there were no laws that made what they were doing illegal. And nationally, they're the ones who are making the laws. This is not illegal. Nothing that they had done was illegal. I mean, I have to side with the defendants in the Nuremberg trials on that point. And this is going to really bite everybody in the ass. All of these podcasters, all of the journalists, Because I've been knocking at the door of the journalists for 20 years, whistleblowing on everybody, screaming for the Epstein files. I'm like, I'm handing you everybody in the Epstein files, not only just their names, but I get cases against them and all sorts of evidence against them. But no, I represent white privilege, and I'm from the Epstein class, so I'm a persona non grata. Oh, the trophy wife who stayed at home with the kids, persona non grata. But the sugar baby, Virginia Giuffre, extortionist, there you've turned her into a martyr. Erica Kirk, you're turning her into a freaking martyr as the trad wife. I mean, one of the things is clear is this woman, she was looking to be in the limelight any which way she could. The entire time, she dated these baseball guys, or I don't know, basketball, baseball, whatever. Became their honeypots. But when they weren't going to make it big, she changes. I mean, this is typical, 101 in finding a meal ticket husband. What do you think she was trained for by her mother with the beauty pageants and all that crap? I mean, Cornelia Guest brought back the debutante parties in the 80s after they had gone out of mode in England in the 1950s because, as Prince Philip said, they were bloody daft, and Princess Margaret said every tart in town is trying to get in. Now, oh God, look at what the debutante parties have become. But the beauty, all of these beauty pageants, that's just the poor person's, social climbing thing. The debutante is for the wealthy. The beauty pageants are for the poor and the middle class. But they're all stepping stones, and they're all, social climbing tools for these Stepford wives. And Marianne Seigart, there's a really good article, and it's actually some academian article report about Vienna and the debutante society of High Society of Vienna in the 1800s. And that's precisely when Marianne Seigart's great-great-grandfather is coming to power, and the whole kit and caboodle starts there. But no, Marianne Seigart, she's too busy explaining how women can have it all, why we're not taken seriously, and what we can do about it. I keep on saying, behave seriously. Get down in the trenches instead of getting up on a podium and giving a frickin' speech filled with nothing but propaganda of the feminists.
I asked this question because I want us to think about some things that are going on right now. Okay, we come back to anti-Semitism. So even though the Jews have been largely assimilated, we have anti-Semitism in Germany, so that would have been the case for some of them. Have no idea what percentage of the population that may be, but obviously that would exist for some people. Apathy. Now, I don't mean this that they intentionally didn't care, but they're living their own lives. They've got their jobs. They've got their family. They've got their own concerns.
They intentionally didn't care because I've been warning everybody for 20 years on the internet. We didn't have the internet when the rise to power of Hitler. Now we do. It's been all out there. It's like at that time, if I was standing in the middle of the street every day, all day long, in the middle of High Street, everybody passing out, guess what's happening? Guess what's happening? Guess what's happening? And nobody pays any attention to me. No, she's just some crazy woman who stands out on the street saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Chicken Little. Yeah.
They're just completely involved in what's going on in their own lives, and they're not really paying attention to what's going on outside of them. This is not the age of the internet or social media either, so your awareness is going to really be based on how aware you want.
As I said, yeah. But see, your societies, your communities, they were much smaller. Washington, D.C., for example, after World War II, less than 1 million people. It's 6.5 million people today. Now, pre-World War II, I forget exactly, but I wouldn't say it was half of that, but I mean, it was World War I, World War II. That's when you saw the population of Washington escalate. Washington, D.C. was created in order to serve the American people, not as a playing ground for a bunch of entitled whores and pimps to party hardy. And that's what it has become. And spy on people. Oh my God, after World War I, look at how that's where the military-industrial complex took power and became as powerful and as ruthless as the corporations.
To be, or if you live in a city as opposed to a rural area, a lot of things can impact how much people even know. So there's kind of this element of apathy where people are more concerned with what impacts them directly and not what's not impacting them. Fear of repercussions. Go back to that Reichstag fire decree. That applied to everybody. So if you're a German...
Yeah, look at the whole Charlie Kirk thing with how the second he said anything bad about Israel, all of a sudden he's an anti-Semite. Even blowing with the wind, Megyn Kelly has said, "Oh no, you can't say I'm an anti-Semite." Tucker Carlson's he's dug in his heels there as well, going, "Excuse me, are you people crazy or what?" So
who decides that
nobody wants to get involved in any unpleasantness. I mean, Bobby Kennedy, a volunteer for Bobby Kennedy's campaign in 2024. She said, "Oh, the reason that Bobby Kennedy's campaign is ignoring you is because nobody wants to be involved in any unpleasantness." I'm like, you got to be kidding me, lady. You've got to be kidding me. I was like, lady, there is only unpleasantness to be had in this shit show. Anybody who doesn't want to deal with any unpleasantness better get out of the game. I mean, one of the things that I'm applauding Marjorie Taylor Greene, first off, her congressional hearing before she resigned about what's going on in the nonprofits, but then why is she ignoring me? And then second, go for it, gal. Anybody who screams back at Trump, when he screams at you, I want you on my team. We don't have to be best buddy. I don't know, whatever. I mean, I'm a conciliatory person. Whatever. But I'm not here to make friends. I mean, Washington is infected with brown-nosing, snot-nosed brat, spineless idiots. And I mean, I have no qualm and no sympathy for any of these snot-nosed brides. "Oh, but you're going to take my job away as a life coach? You're going to take my job away as a marketer?" I mean, I get pissed off today, excuse me, in International Square where I'm working. They're closing on Saturdays. They never have any, because they don't have any business. I'm like, of course, you're downtown. People don't live down here. But I said, you have some young families with young toddlers that live in the DuPont Circle area, that work in the Logan Circle area, all of that area. There is nothing in downtown Washington and all of that Penn Quarter, all of this area. You don't have anything that... Everybody used to talk to me about Chuck E. Cheese. I never went to Chuck E. Cheese, but I imagine it's like what Chuck E. Cheese for kids. I said, we've got this area that's closed off, put some, chairs with some, a little low table, some crayons, some paper for the kids, some, have some activities there, some manual art stuff they can play. You can even get one of those like plastic jungle gyms. Pull it out on the Saturday and, they're constantly moving furniture for all of these conferences for the asshole PhDs. I'm like, just don't bring me any Groupon, bottomless brunch people who go and throw up in the bathrooms. Because if you want to say, oh, but kids throw up, I'm like, yeah, well, I prefer the kids throw up than all of that shit. An adult who's drunk. That's another thing. This is the Americans with their extremism, but I won't go into that. But I'm like, bring it, and he's like, oh, they won't come in. That's too far away. I said, are you freaking kidding me? I know what it's like to have young kids and be traveling around and stuff. And I said, you get a free a prefix menu in here. The donut shop where I'm working. I'm like, where's your sugar daddy, honey? Because I don't know what you're doing here. There's tons. I've got a milkshake machine. We can make all sorts of things. Ponte te pilas, ponte te pilas. I'm like, no wonder this country is being turned into a third world country. You got all sorts of opportunities to make money here and to bring in the business, but you're too busy sitting on your ass. You got the little marketing expert over there. I don't know what the frick she does all day long.
You're going to oppose the Nazi regime. Don't you think that law could come back and get you? When you have people who are already being thrown into political prisons, Dachau, for example, first one to be created.
Oh, yeah, well, political prisons, excuse me. My ex-husband, when trying to get me locked up in a psychiatric ward failed, his next tactic was a prison. And believe me, I was afraid because I had read the book about Maria Jose Carrascosa. It was a Spanish woman, I forget, Reyes Monforte, who wrote the book about Maria Jose Carrascosa, who was she ended up 8 years in a New Jersey jail that didn't have jurisdiction over her divorce, the custody battle. She was a lawyer. She kept on submitting habeas corpus, but it was rejected. I mean, the victims of the courts, of family courts, oh, it's a badge of honor to have gone to jail under contempt of court. I was like, oh, ladies, I passed beyond contempt of court so long ago, it's not even funny. I mean, contempt? That's putting it mildly.
But you already have people being thrown into these political prisons. Are you going to speak up when that could happen to you? So fear of the repercussions of what may happen, and then just an underestimation of its severity because people didn't know where it was going.
See, if nobody understands what I have been doing for the past 20 years, why? Oh, it's just a divorce. Who cares? Well, first off, I care that there's a jurisprudence that says that I was some drug addict, juvenile delinquent from the time that I was 14 and sent to juvie. It's like, Fox Crop, that's a freaking country club for entitled little snot-nosed brats. It costs $70,000 a year. 77 for international students. Cobham Hall in England. That's where I went first at 14 years old. It's not quite expensive, but we've got Princess Antonia of Prussia in there. I mean, Lord, it was for girls. So ladies all over the place. I remember one of the Lady Hetty Bathurst. She was one of my roommates, and I found out that she was a lady. I was like, oh my gosh, she hated me calling her Lady Hetty. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I was like, oh my God, in the United States, we don't have all of this lady and lord stuff. Like, you read about this in like Barbara Cartland movies or books. So anyway, I was like, I'll be damned if I'm going to let somebody defame me like that. I know that's what my children, my sons have believed. So, there's the defamation thing that pisses me off, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's like with Trump. Oh, he's a convicted felon. I'm like, yeah, by New York courts. New York has lost all legitimacy with all the party politicking and all the bullshit it's pulled. The courts and the entire political system. New York City, you can go and fuck yourself because nobody even says boo about any juror. Oh, he's a convicted whatever. Oh, New York courts, yeah, that doesn't count. I mean, you could say the same thing about the Spanish courts. Yeah, it doesn't count because they just use their constitution for toilet paper, like everybody else. So first, it is on a personal level, that has pissed me off and separating me from my sons. If I had done like my mother had wanted and what was politically correct and came back to DC and tried to find myself a meal ticket husband, like everybody expected me to, and I had to steal one from another woman, who cares? That's the name of the game. I mean, that's why the women at the IMF Family Association and World Bank Family Network were so worried about me stealing their meal ticket husbands. I'm like, ladies, I'm not after them. Believe me. If I had wanted to do that, I would have played the debutante bullshit back in the 80s and found myself a meal ticket husband here already and not have left. I mean, the whores and pimps and the IMF and the World Bank, it's disgusting. Really disgusting. But, I keep on standing my ground, and more so, because if this isn't, I'm like, you people, do you not understand? I have been telling everybody with dual national and children with dual nationalities, y'all are fucking yourselves over. You're shooting yourselves in the head. You deny me my rights? My kids have 3 nationalities. And they've been told to fuck off by all 3 governments. I got 2 nationalities, American and French. And I want to see both of them in court. I mean, fought tooth and nail. I mean, I prepared my own case, which challenges the second jurisprudence on violence against women as human rights violations. That's Gonzalez Carreño versus Spain, 2014, CEDAW, Convention Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Now, I don't care how we do this. And when Barbara Stone came along with submitting to the International Criminal Courts under crimes against humanity, and she's been looking at what she calls the Nuremberg style laws, and that's submitted to the International Criminal Courts. Now it's collecting dust. We need some political support. I don't care how this is done. As I say, we do it through the International Criminal Courts. They're politicized, so that's problematic. We can do it through some sort of grand jury at a national. It's like, I'm not married to any solution there, but this has got to stop. And the thing is if you don't fight for the rights of somebody else, your neighbor, the next one they'll be coming for is you.
We often look at the Germans. Why didn't the Germans do anything? Why didn't the Germans say anything? Well, there were certain groups of people who were concerned and who did say things, but obviously it only went so far. We're in 2024 America. I never thought I would see the rise of anti.
Well, if the legal profession had gotten in there, the politicians had gotten in there, no, I don't want to get involved. Like I've been having to deal with for frickin' 10, 20 years, it wouldn't have happened. I'm like, people, I have prepared these cases and argued them for you. You're going to make a ton of money. You asshole lawyers, all you care about is money. Well, here. I keep on telling to all of the victims, I'm like, lawyers are like sharks. You got to get the blood money going up their nose. And then they'll go on a feeding frenzy. That's all they care about. They don't care about the law. Nor do the politicians.
Anti-Semitism in this country that we're seeing right now. Utterly shocking to me. What do we have right now? A rise in anti-Semitism. Apathy on the part of so many people who are more concerned with going to school, their job, their families.
Yep.
You know what? It doesn't impact me. I'm just not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
We have that going on right now. I'm very much paraphrasing, but there's the statement.
Blake Bedsnar. Yeah, I have some criticism there for things that are going on. But I have to agree, somebody in his community, Lubbock, Texas, my parents were in Lubbock, Texas for a while. So Lubbock, Texas people would, anybody who worked at the library would know my mother and father, um, or the used bookstores. So, somebody in the community said, "What do you care? What do you care about Tyler Robinson? Who is he to you?" It's like, wait a second, buddy. This could be you or me next. John Bray, he spent a lot of time of his own time and made money from this. I don't think so. I mean, he's one of those. He's not in the podcaster stuff. He really, and he said, because he had done some stuff when he was young, and he had a kid that, like, he wouldn't want. It can happen to anybody. If you don't fight for your neighbor's rights, tomorrow they may come for you.
And, evil prevails when good people do nothing. We've got apathy, fear of repercussions. What if I say something? And we've got this politically charged environment in this country. What if I say something and I get fired?
Yeah.
Dominic was wondering if I even wanted my name on this because I work at a public university.
It's happened to me time and time and time again. My favorite is I got fired from a job for supporting Bobby Kennedy, and Morgan, who Bobby Kennedy's former partners, no case here. Oh, and listen to their advertisements. I'm like, you goddamn ambulance chasing assholes.
What if I say something and I get fired? People come after me, right? Fear of repercussions. What if it's not even I'm going to get fired? Just what if my coworkers are going to come after me? What if people are going to start bashing me on social media?
Yeah.
What if my neighbors won't talk to me anymore? You think we have this going on right now? Yep. Underestimation of its severity. Well, can't predict the future. But history tells us, be careful about this one. Be careful that we don't write it off as nothing. Remember what I said about words matter? Language matters. Language is dangerous. All this is at play right now. Keep that in mind. All right, so we have Nuremberg, 1935, kind of a watershed year in many ways, especially looking back at it historically. Just ask this question, but are we at risk of repeating history? Something we need to be very aware of and paying attention to. 1936, it's quiet again. Actually, 1936, kind of okay year. Why? Germany hosted the Olympics. Well, now we have to put a nice face for the world. We've got to take down all those anti-Semitic posters, all those things we had posted around the cities. We've got to take that down because now we've got to look good for the world. This was, by the way, the first time that countries threatened to boycott an international event over human rights. They didn't, but it's the first time we see that threat of a boycott. So we have Germany host the Berlin Olympics, 1936, of course, from our own history of the big story of Jesse Owens, where Hitler was shaking hands of people who were winning gold and wouldn't shake Jesse Owens' hand. I just watched an excellent documentary on this just a few days ago. All right, but because of that, again, from the Jews side of things got better in 1936. 1937, not a whole lot happening. Really, why? Well, because Hitler's focused on preparing Germany for war. He's got a timetable, resources are going into that, planning's going into that, and so that's really the focus. 1937, things are calm. Then we get to 1938, and things are going to intensify real fast. Because now Germany's starting to take those steps that it needs to take to prepare for war, which is creating this greater Germany, expanding its borders in a way to be able to protect it as before the war machine would actually hit the battlefield. So in 1938, March of 38, we have the Anschluss. I had it on the outline, but you have the Anschluss. This is when the Germans rolled into Austria. They're actually all ethnically German, but rolled into Austria, and Austria gets incorporated then into this greater Germany, something that had been talked about since World War I. And so Austria becomes part of Germany. This is kind of hard to see on this screen, but what you see are people standing around watching, and then you've got Jews down here scrubbing the ground. All of the laws and legislation that had been put into place in Germany over time are put into place in Austria just about overnight. I mean, the Austrian Jews are hit with it fast. And for a Nazi regime that didn't like Jews, kind of ironic, everywhere they went, they got a whole lot more Jews. And when they go into Austria, they get at least 200,000 more Jews that they have to deal with. So all that anti-Semitic legislation goes into place. This is an image of the public humiliation of the Jews. And so things start to intensify. Now, I want to make a long story, well, I'll get to that long story. I have to make a long story short. This also happened in 38. Jews will now have to identify themselves on their official paperwork. So you see this marked with the J for Judah. Then they also had to adopt females the name Sarah, and for males, Israel. so that by name alone, they could be identified as Jews on their paperwork. So all females had to incorporate the name Sarah, all males the name Israel on their paperwork. The Judah badge wouldn't go into effect as being mandatory until 1941, but that was coming as well. So we had these measures.
I wonder why Israel. I wonder if that has anything to do with why Israel was named Israel. I'm not. Yeah, I need to read the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. Yeah, it's on the to-do list.
We've seen ostracization. This is identification. We've seen the discrimination, starting to see the persecution, but this is identification. All right. The big thing that happens in 1938, aside from incorporating Austria, which is here, incorporating Austria into Germany, is Kristallnacht. And this is where I said I'll have to make a long story short, but essentially after the Germans took Austria, Poland became concerned. Poland had a large Jewish population. They didn't have a good relationship with their Jews. I go to Poland pretty regularly. They don't like to admit this today. But the anti-Semitism in Poland was really off the charts. They didn't like the Jews. And a large number of Polish Jews had immigrated into Germany, into Austria over the years. And so Poland decides, you know what? We're going to put a law that says any Polish Jew that left Poland and hasn't been here for 5 years loses their citizenship. Can't come back. So they did this right after the Anschluss.
The thing is nobody seems to like the Jews. So, without, she's anti-Semitic. No. But Jews start asking the question, why is it that people don't seem to like you very much when you come into their territories? Now, my response to this is this happens to every single migratory group, and that's because they're moving in and it's all about jobs. It's all about survival. It's all about preference for jobs and allocation of resources. This is why it is very, very important for the governments to stop getting in bed with all of this imperialism, elitism, the central banks, and these boom and bust economies, and focus on sustainable economies that is an equilibrium between industrialist and, an industrial agrarian and rural economies. So that's where you got to focus. If you want to stop all of this, people being pissed off and hating everybody and all of that, you got to start there.
Of Austria, recognizing the warning signs, like, hey, a lot of our Polish Jews who've left are about to come back. We don't want them back. So they give until the end of October for Jews to decide where they're going to be, and if they don't come back, too late. 3/5 of Germany's Jews by this time are foreign, or 3/5 of Germany's foreign Jews, I should say, were Polish. They start deporting Polish Jews, sending them back to Poland. At least, I'd say 18,000 of them get sent from Germany into Poland. And a lot of times they're just being dumped over the border. In this last minute, right before the deadline, literally just being dumped over the border. No way to take care of themselves. Nowhere to live. Nothing, just dumped. The 17-year-old Jew in Paris, Herschel Greenspan, received a letter from his sister being informed that their family had been deported to Poland. He was livid. He decided to go to the German embassy in Paris. His goal was that he was going to kill the German ambassador. He doesn't get to meet with the ambassador. A lower-ranking secretary comes out, Ernst von Rott. He comes out. Greenspan shot him. He died 2 days later. Hitler is going to seize on this, though, because now we're in November. We're actually getting close to the anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch, which, in Nazi history, the Nazis who died had become martyrs. This was legendary for them. So all this is kind of coming together towards the anniversary of that. Hitler decides this is a really good time to unleash the SA on the Jewish population in Greater Germany. And that's what Kristallnacht is. It's a pogrom. November 9th through 10th, 1938. The SA was given the task of going after Jewish synagogues, Jewish businesses. They hoped the German people would get involved, although there was disappointment here again that the German people didn't get so involved. They weren't as enthusiastic about it as the Nazi leadership hoped that they would be. But nonetheless, you can see what's going on here. The synagogue's on fire. You see the water here coming from the fire trucks? That's not putting the fire out from the synagogue. That's putting water on the buildings next door so that they didn't catch on fire. Here are some other images. And Yad Vashem tells us 1,400 synagogues were attacked. 261 synagogues destroyed, largely Germany, but you can see this also took place in Austria. This is where it gets its name, Kristallnacht meaning night of broken glass. It gets its name from the attack on the Jewish businesses as they busted in the windows, destroyed these businesses. So it was a very messy affair, at least 8,000 businesses.
Yeah. One of the tactics used when Trump won in 2016, and Arabella Advisors was involved in this, was to apparently like 50% of all of the new restaurants in Washington, like 2016 on, or around for a long time. Because Arabella Advisors, I think, it's kind of been broken up. But see, that was exposed. It was a Clinton tool. But they financed all of these restaurants, Celebrity Chef, and all of that. I mean, the labor rights violations are all over the map in there. Mismanagement. I mean, this gets into the whole GDP about, moving women into the workplace, the workforce. These are managerial positions because women have always been in the workforce. I'm sick and tired of this old discussion. Women didn't work before. Yes, they always worked, but into positions of power in political and commercial institutions has just taken jobs that were previously done by women and turned them into paying jobs, which is then taxed, not only income tax, but also the goods and services that you're producing are going to be sales tax. So you're another tax for the government coffers. And it's not made a more efficient or better community or society. In fact, the exact opposite is true. So you have that, again, it comes back to jobs and more jobs. So you have all of these restaurants that have come to Washington, all sorts of jobs, GDP, it helps bring up the GDP. But I've told several of the restaurant owners that are discriminating against me. They'll hire pedophiles and women who will sleep with them, but a competent manager, they don't want them in their restaurants. I'm like, I'd save you money. You'd make more money. Oh, no, but I wouldn't kiss your ass or suck you know what. Megyn Kelly says any woman would do it because she wanted to be on TV. Yeah, I'm not even going to do it for a minimum wage job. Thank you very much. But I keep on telling these guys, I say, oh, you see your beautiful windows there? Everybody can see into your beautiful restaurant from the street. Because they keep on saying, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about what's happening here, this country, this community. Ain't my problem. I just want to make money. In fact, the day of the shutdown, or right before the COVID shutdown, the Greek owner of the restaurant where I was working on K Street, when I'm telling everybody, people, just make sure you wash your hands, don't panic, but just wash your hands and don't put your hands to your eyes, your nose. That's, basic healthcare recommendations. And the owner is saying, all I care about is making money. Yeah, we all know that. But I keep on telling him, ooh, you don't care? Well, guess what? When they start smashing those windows, beautiful windows that are so hard to keep clean, when they start smashing through those windows and coming in here and trashing your restaurant, I think you're going to start caring. Assholes.
Targeted. 30,000 Jewish men sent to these prison camps. Dachau, Buchenwald, Sachsenhausen, primarily here. And you can see their locations. 30,000 Jewish men then sent to these have to pay their way out. At least 91 people killed. This was a pogrom, but it's interesting because it's the only one in Germany. The Germans didn't like messiness. They tend to be very efficient. They tend to be industrious. They didn't like the mess. There was a big mess to clean up. There literally was glass everywhere. Buildings burnt down, things shattered. It was a mess. They won't do it again. From here forward, the violence is going to take place outside of Germany. So this is really the one example, the height of the persecution that you're going to see in Germany proper. Everything that else is going to happen outside of Germany's borders, and Hitler did that too, again, being savvy, knowing that the German people didn't have the stomach for it. It needed to be hidden away from the eyes of the German people so that they didn't know the reality of what was going on. So he's going to keep it as far from them as he can. All right, but we have this. This is one of those big moments where obviously you have major escalation. It's turned into violence, very open persecution. Again, well known globally. This wasn't a secret what happened. So this is the New York Times reporting it here. I'll point out 1938 is also the year that now the Nazi government would go after the Jews economically. So they've already gone after them in terms of civil professions, social, cultural aspects, the arts, education, military. They left the Jewish economic realm off the table because the Jews actually did a lot for Germany's economy. So that had been left off. Now 1938, those Jewish businesses are going to be Aryanized. The Jews are going to have to register them, their property confiscated and so forth. So now we get to see the full economic persecution come in 1938. Again, we've got the question of, at this point, what should they do? Should they remain in Germany and Austria, or should they try to go somewhere else? And if it is go somewhere else, where should they go? Most who did leave would go to Western Europe. Some may go to Britain, some may be able to get as far as the United States or Canada, but obviously because of logistics, the prime destination was Western Europe, which unfortunately meant every one of those Jews was doomed once the war was in effect and the Nazis conquered those areas. So those Jews really just bought themselves time. It's a map just really showing where they may go, from Netherlands, Belgium, France being prime locations. A number of countries, the United States is one of them, would step up the number of Jews that we accepted. We've accepted the full quota of people from the Germany, Austria area that we could accept by way of our immigration laws at that time. So we took 30-something thousand Jews in between 1938 and 39. Britain increased the number of Jews that they took in, and then notably...
And 10,000 unaccompanied children to the UK. And how many to the United States? What happened to all of these children? There's something, and I keep on seeing this, is particularly on X, you see this, that before the Jeffrey Epstein, there was, like in a school or something, they were trafficking kids, and there were like these tunnels. And, you know, taking kids to grape them, perhaps sacrifice, porn, all sorts of stuff. You know, that stuff has been going on for a long time, forever. A friend of my mother's, whose sons went to Hillhouse School with my brother in London, that's King's Charles alma mater, said, "Oh, this has been going on for so long, there's nothing that we can do about it." I'm like, yeah, it's been going on for a long time, but that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do about it.
Of course, the Brits also enacted the kinder transports. So they would allow 10,000 unaccompanied children to come to Britain. They had to have sponsors, but they allowed 10,000 unaccompanied children to come, recognizing that the situation had become very dire for these children. Unfortunately, most of these children would not have homes or family to go home to once the war was over. All right, but we can see efforts after Kristallnacht and after the events of 1938 by the international community recognizing, okay, the situation's getting worse, and some efforts were increased. The Germans were also increasing their efforts. These two men, Adolf Eichmann and Reinhard Heydrich, would enact, and actually Eichmann was the first to do this in Austria, but the Central Office for Jewish Immigration, again, immigration with an E, meaning to leave. So they erected these offices to help the Jews to leave, to encourage them to leave Germany and Austria. Now they imposed a 25% flight tax on their wealth, so unless you really had means to be able to leave, you probably weren't going to do it. But even the Nazi leadership was trying to help the Jews leave. And I don't say that like they were being kind. All right, this just gives...
I don't know. I think the poorer you were, the better in a situation. I mean, it's like, you got $100. Yeah. You got 100 million. Oh.
Do some numbers of the 500,000 Jews in Germany and 200,000 Jews in Austria. This is starting, marked at the 1933 point. You can see how many had left by the outbreak of war. So obviously you have the shock of 1933, but then those numbers start to go down. Of course, 1938 and 39, you see much higher numbers of Jewish immigration after the events of 38. Made it very clear that things were going terribly in the wrong direction.
Now, with
1939.
all of this fleeing and everything, your best investment, well, your property can be taken from you and all of that. I mean, your land and all of your worldly goods. But one thing, and this is why I understood one of my friends at Cobham Hall. She's wealthy family from India, but married into an extremely wealthy family of India. It's the part of the Gupta family. These are the ones who sell airplanes and airplane parts. So that's connected to the military. But when she got married, I mean, oh my lord, rubies and diamonds and gold and pearls, and I was like, my lord. But she said, my husband, he can say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and my kids are taken from me and I'm thrown out on the streets under Indian law. I was like, oh my God, how horrible not to have any rights. And I was like, oh, the joke's on me because it happened to the American in Spain. But now I understand. I mean, I used to make jewelry when I was in Bogota. So I mean, the stones that I have, I can't sell those. But the gold, oh yeah. And in fact, I want an artisan. I want to bring back markets here so I would be able to sell my gemstones. But part of the thing that's kept me afloat and a roof over my head, I mean, nothing like my friend from India and all of that she had. This is, I even had gold dust because when you make jewelry, you file it down and you recuperate the gold dust, and then you clean it up and you reuse that gold, of course. But my point being, oh yeah, gold. This is why these things also are valuable. If you got to run, gold and precious stones, easy to transport, relatively easy to hide. I mean, much more so than a farm or a family heirloom. Some artwork, and also artwork. That's subjective. That's a whole. Oh, since the Renaissance, that's been a whole favoritism racket that of the ruling elite and with the artisans. Anyway, that's one of my projects, is to stop that exploitation of the artisans. But yeah, when in my divorce in Spain, I was like, well, now I know why they give all of this gold to all of the Middle Eastern women when they get married. Because if they get thrown out on the streets, they got their gold. One of the guys in Madrid, he's like, my lord, you sound like one of the gitanas, the gypsy ladies who's going downtown to sell some gold to pay this bill or that bill. I said, yeah, well, I'm not hawking anything. They explained me how that worked, and I'm like, no, here to sell it.
We get war. So I'm going to have Dominique help me change slides, but I have this up real quick, just showing the prelude to war, prelude to 1939. And you can see that the things the Nazis did, they withdrew from the League of Nations right after they came to power.
I mean, one of my neighbors in Madrid, well, she's been my neighbor in Colombia. She's an actress, model, part of the whole Jeffrey Epstein class. But from Colombia, and she was like, oh yeah, she was explaining about hawk, how to hawk something. I've never done that in my life. But she said, yeah, I'll take my Rolex down there and hawk it. And I was like, but wait a second, the interest that they're charging you, that's ludicrous. And I mean, she's not using it to pay any bills. She's using it to buy, I don't know, whatever. And I was like, that's ludicrous. You just don't buy whatever it is that you would want it to buy. And you're hawking the Rolex behind your husband's back, I know. That's freaking crazy.
Announced rearmament in 35, remilitarized the Rhineland in 36. All that was in violation of Versailles. Annexed Austria in 38. Of course, we had the Munich conference. They got the Sudetenland, so that's here. Took over Czechoslovakia in March of 39. Signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviets in 39. And then September, we're going to be at war. So now I just want to do a review of what happens when the war breaks out, because everything we've talked about so far, we're not in the Holocaust yet. You've got discrimination, you have persecution, things have been getting bad. We're not in the Holocaust yet. We're not there until we've got war. And the Nazi regime would use war as a cover to carry out what we know as the Holocaust. I had a thing where I was just going to briefly mention Hitler. We don't really know exactly what warped his brain like it did. When he was in his teens, he spent time in Vienna, and he seemed to be very inclined towards extremism, towards radical thought. He really was introduced to this extremist anti-Semitic movement when he was in Vienna as a teenager. And it seemed to just kind of build from there. But obviously, he had latched on to the racial element of that. Now, he was a bit contradictory, because even though he said the Jews were a race and that's how he viewed them, if he wasn't sure, he would use religion to suffice, or he would use just physical characteristics or whatever. So if in doubt, but he adhered to the racial version of anti-Semitism. All right, 1939, the war began on September 1st.
It was all just about rhetoric. This is one of the things that's pissing me off with Noam Chomsky. He's this big wig linguist, Marxist. University of Arizona, Tucson. That's where I grew up. Look at what the ruling elite in Tucson have done. When I grew up there, it was filled with Republicans, cactuses, and coyotes. Now, you got the Epstein class that's taken over, and look what's happened. You got overpriced spas and all sorts of bullshit going on in there. Noam Chomsky, I'm like, look at the rhetoric. I've been looking at the rhetoric and the ideologies of the feminists, the minorities, and the woke illiberalism within the Democratic Party for 20 years. I mean, it's not the Democratic Party, the socialist parties in Europe, the left. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll look at it when I have a chance. There's another guy, I forget what his name is. He's kind of the Noam Chomsky of Canada. Same can of worms. All of these academians, I have had it. I have had it with them. Get up on a podium, all you care about is money, 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 money.
First, this is when the Germans invaded Poland. Incidentally, because of that non-aggression pact that they had signed with the Soviets, there was a secret clause that allowed for the Soviets to take the eastern part of Poland. And so a couple weeks after the Germans invaded, the Soviets invaded from the other side. So Poland gets hit from two sides. The Russians will take the east, the Germans take the west. But the German side is divided up into two components. So the very western part, this is going to be land for Germany, good, fertile land, Lebensraum, living space for the Germans. Right, so this is going to go to the Germans. This is known as the general government, and there's really no better way to describe it than it's a dumping ground. They force the Poles off of their land and send them into here, and of course, the Jews. And so the general government becomes essentially this dumping ground for everybody that the Nazi regime didn't want on German territory. So keep in mind the general government, because this is ground zero for really the worst of everything, really what we associate most with the Holocaust, ghettos, death camps. Now, on September 21st, 1939, Reinhard Heydrich issued this directive. It was highlighted as a temporary plan, which was said to be distinct from the final aim. What's the final aim? Well, the Germans were so good about never putting this stuff in writing. If they had just told us what they believed was the final aim, we wouldn't have to debate this. Scholars get into big fights over what this means. Is it just expelling the Jews?
I don't know. I've been telling everybody one of the reasons why the Germans, one of the reasons why HR and the administrative function are have been turned into this useless no man's land filled with idiots who don't know how to do anything. And, the records are a mess. And that's intentional because that's what brought the Germans down. They kept good records. And the proof was there. Now your records are in such a mess. What the frick is going on with these people? Oh, and then you get in the email stuff in there. That was also intentional in order to create chaos.
Jews? Is it just getting rid of the Jews, or is it exterminating the Jews? Well, the final aim's one of those. But these were identified as temporary plans, distinct from the final aim, which were to be kept secret, and interesting that they need to keep it secret. One, to relocate all Jews from the countryside to the cities of the general government, and then two, create Jewish councils, or Judenräte, led by respective Jewish elders to help assist in their efforts. Again, smart, you take Jewish leaders, people who are respected by the Jewish community, put them as middlemen, because the people are more likely to listen to them. Those leaders are more likely to think that maybe they can do something to help protect the people. Put them in these positions to assist the effort.
Same thing's they're doing now.
This is ultimately the beginning of ghettoization. So putting Jews in ghettos, the very first one we saw at the end of 39, but it's 1940 and 41 when we see the major project of ghettoization taking place. So this shows you a small view of the concentration of ghettos, and you can see that they're mostly being formed here in the general government.
I mean, the new Jim Crow was in order to assure that our ghettos in the United States urban areas remain ghettos. 90% of Black urban males, poor urban males, either are in prison or have a criminal, criminal record. Candace Owens, one of the reasons she opted out of it, she's been gentrified. She hangs out with the whites because she's like, no, 6 out of the 9 men in my family have criminal records. Well, Candace, why don't you address the problems from the Black community that goes back into the Black culture and, the slave trade, which, excuse me, it was the Black Africans who were selling the booty from all of their wars to the slave traders. And all of this stuff that it was just the whites, it was just the whites, it was just the whites involved, that's just playing the race card. And Candace has really been doing that with her book club stuff. The Freemasons, I've gone into that. But it's this, why am I, the white privilege woman who's been canceled by everybody and targeted in hate crimes by everybody? I'm the only one here who's saying, excuse me, new Jim Crow, I want to see this shit in court, in the international criminal courts, under human rights violations, under the Constitution. And this has been on purpose. It's just like the drug trade. We all know that the CIA, we have evidence, even on Maxine Waters' Wikipedia page, going there about how the CIA was involved in the drug trade in order to get crack cocaine and all of these Black urban kids on crack cocaine so we could stick them into prison so they'd be disenfranchised. This is common knowledge. Colleen, when I read the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, I said, oh, lady, let's go. Oh, no. Black woman. She was like, you're biting from an apple bigger than I'm willing to chew. And what has she been doing ever since? Cashing in.
This is to 41. So these would be the first.
Jim Crow, I think that was 2010. I know the date for these because I just go on Amazon and I see when I bought it. There I got the proof.
First ghettos. Now, this shows you what this ends up looking by the end of 42. Well, there's over 1,000 of them. And of course, this would also correspond with the German war plans as the Germans began to move east. Right? But look at all these ghettos. 1941, we have Operation Barbarossa. So this was the military plan to invade the Soviet Union. Now, before they ever went in, they trained a group of SS known as the Einsatzgruppen. It means special task force. They're killers. They're execution squads. It's led by the
Does this sound familiar to anybody? NSA? CIA? FBI? Sounds familiar to me.
SS, but they weren't all members of the SS. They were coming from all levels of society, actually. But they were being trained specifically to serve as killers. They would follow the army And so now we start to see the war of annihilation. When the Germans went into Poland, they didn't actually begin the process of annihilation yet. They began the process of concentration, concentrating the Jews into the general government so that they were stuck. But the mass killings had not started. People may have been dying in large numbers of starvation and elements, but the mass killings hadn't started. The mass killings started with Operation Barbarossa, June of 1941. So the German army, the Wehrmacht, goes into Russia in these three prongs, north, center, and south, so that the army can continue doing what the army was designed to do, which was war, make war, expand. The army needed to keep moving. The Einsatzgruppen is trained to go in behind the army to help to consolidate all of this territory that's being taken and essentially get rid of the Jews. So they go into the towns, they go into the villages, kind of a similar story everywhere they go. They're able to find out who the Jewish population was. A lot of times synagogues kept excellent records of all their members, so then they knew who all the Jews were in the town. Men sent out for labor. A lot of times they were digging trenches. Women and children separated. Eventually, the women and children would be marched out of the town too, told that they're going to meet up with the men. They typically would be brought to the trenches that the men may have just dug, where everybody was executed. The greatest example of that came at Babi Yar. And I say greatest, there were a couple other on a similar scale. But this one in September of 1941, 33,771 people killed in 2 days. All shot the same way. They lined them up, stripped the women down to their undergarments, lined them up, shot them, they fell into the trench. Next group, come, line them up, shoot them, fall into the trench. They did this over and over and over again, to the point they killed 33,771 people in 2 days. I wish this was the only story of those executions. There's too many of them to tell. Because they did the same thing everywhere they went. Why are they killing them? Because they're Jews. What crime had they committed? They were Jews. That's it. It's based on these anti-Semitic hatred. And the fact that the Nazi leadership saw no room for the Jews in their world, in their Aryan world. Now, what became problematic, if you will, is that this was a very personalized way of killing. The soldiers had to face the people that they were going to kill, sometimes spent days with them, and then had to walk with them, literally march them out to their execution place, stare them face to face while they killed them, and it took a toll on the executioners. They were becoming alcoholics. They were starting to have real bad mental health issues, and the leadership realized this isn't the most efficient system. It's also, I mean, when you're shooting over 1 million people, you're also using a lot of bullets that are not being used to fight the war, and it's taking a toll on the men, and so the Nazis decide they need a more efficient system. In Russia, they started using gas vans. They used a lot of deception with this, told them that they were going to be taking a ride, going somewhere else, but then they would put the pipes from the outside in, and so the carbon monoxide would kill the people. Still not the most efficient system, but this would be an improved version. This would be at the Helmnode death camp. So they did improve upon what looked like the RV to a much larger version that could kill quicker. And of course, then this is going to become an even larger idea into the death camp plan, developing 5 distinct death camps where Jews would be sent and killed in a very industrialized way, like the assembly line, processed through, fed into a gas chamber, bodies taken out, whole process, efficient, could kill a lot of people at one time. 1942 is when we mark this transition. Have to be kind of careful with these words, and Dominique she cut my time short, so I'm trying to hurry. We mark January 1942 because that's when we had the Wannsee Conference. And so January 1942, you have these various leaders and administrators of the Nazi regime who meet in Wannsee. You can see Heydrich's there, Eichmann is there, and then a bunch of, I call them paper pushers. You have a lot of administrators. You look at their titles, a lot of secretaries and paper pushers. A lot of times people say this is when they decided upon the final solution. I take big issue with that. This isn't when they decided on the final solution. This is when they formalized the final solution. Why do we know that? Because back in 1941, the order had already been given months before to transition Auschwitz into a death camp. Helmno was already functioning as a death camp the month prior. Other plans were being made to transition the other camps. They had other purposes in most cases. So this was already in motion. This wasn't decided here. This was rubber stamped here. This was really just a process of logistics. Here's what everybody needs to do. We're going to get this organized. We're going to formalize it so everybody knows their part, and boom. But 1942, after Wannsee, then this paves the way full on for the operation of the death camps. The 5 death camps we have: Auschwitz, Helmno, Treblinka, Majdanek, Sobibor, and Belchitz. I keep saying 5, it's 6. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying 5. But there were 6. All right, so we have the 6, correcting myself, death camps. That was their purpose. Even though, say, at Auschwitz, you still had a labor component. You still had a concentration component. Birkenau, the death camp side of Auschwitz, was designed to kill as many people as quickly as they could. So this begins then that process of depersonalized assembly line, industrial style killing, when now they could kill mass quantities of Jews. Now, there's a big debate in Holocaust studies whether it was always the plan to exterminate the Jews. The intentionalists believe this was the plan. The Nazis had to get it sorted out how they were doing it, but it was always the plan. Others believe it just kind of evolved into that when other plans didn't work. There were a couple plans like the Madagascar plan of sending the Jews to Madagascar. I would argue that was also a death sentence. You're talking a largely, basically an uninhabited island with no way to take care of them. I don't know how they were supposed to live there. But nonetheless, 1942 until these camps are liberated, beginning in 1944, Auschwitz, January of 1945, we have the death camps, which are situated, as you see, mostly in the general government. Through this process, you have the annihilation or the liquidation of Europe's Jews. They started in the East. They started by having to clear out the ghettos because the ghettos were overpopulated. So they started in the East with the ghettos, and then they began to move west. And that's where I said those Jews who had left Germany, they tend to be the first ones put on trains after the Nazis began rounding up the Jews in those Western European countries. You look at this map gives us a sense of how large the scale is. It's massive. From the death camps to the labor camps, to the POW camps, to the transit camps. It's massive. Just imagine the manpower that went into this. Just imagine the transport system, all the trains that were taking people to death camps instead of taking soldiers to the Eastern Front, where the Germans were losing the war by, February of 1943, when they get turned around. But the trains are still going to the death camps. Look how big this is. It really puts into perspective how large this operation actually was.
As a euthanasia center, what exactly
so there were either 5 or 6, now I'm iffy on if I have my numbers right, but 5 or 6 of those in Germany. And so with the euthanasia centers, those were the only things in Germany, but that wasn't for the Jews, that was for the disabled. So people who were Aryan, but they were people who the Nazis didn't want to procreate and who didn't think were viable members of German society because they had a physical or mental deformity, and it went from children to adults. Yeah. All right, last thing I want to say, because we're going to Auschwitz. Can I have like a minute and a half, 2 minutes? Okay, so these are familiar images that we see of the Holocaust. You know, the people they're in the camp uniforms, or they're in tattered clothing and they're emaciated, and you really can't even tell one distinguishing feature from another because everybody's in the same state. I took this photo in Auschwitz itself, Auschwitz I, and I took it because I actually don't like it. They have this one hall where they have all these images of the men, and they're in uniform, and you actually almost can find yourself falling into the Nazi propaganda walking down that hall because you get to the point you just see prisoners, you see criminals. Well, that's not why they were there, right? But you lose the sense that these are human beings, that these are individuals, that these are people who didn't belong there. That they're not criminals, they're in striped uniform, but they're not there because they're criminals, they're there because they're Jews. And we can look at images of this and we can become desensitized. We can lose sight of the tragedy. And I'm gonna go forward real quick. I don't like to really attribute a lot to Joseph Stalin, but he said this and it's so true. 1 death is a tragedy. 1 million is a statistic. And when you start talking about 6 million Jews and this and that, the number's so big, it becomes overwhelming. You start losing your sense of the individual tragedy that was the Holocaust. And teachers, professors, think of different ways to try and make you conceptualize it. Think of the numbers, how many people in a stadium, how many stadiums, marbles in a jar, pennies in whatever it may be. I take a totally different approach. Instead of trying to get you to conceptualize 6 million, I want you to conceptualize 1. I have 2 pictures, families. Look at 1 face. 1. Give that 1 person a story. Because what I want you to understand, when you go to the Holocaust Museum, what I want you to understand is that this isn't a 6 million person statistic. Every person killed was a human being. Everyone. He was a father, he was a brother, he was a husband, he had a profession, he had a personality, he had hopes, he had dreams, he had fears. He's just like us. I'm gonna cry. All right, but just like us.
Yeah, okay. But the thing is I've been giving this spiel to Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, atheist, agnostic. If there's a difference, I contend there is a difference anyway. Yeah, across the board. And I keep on saying, y'all are digging yourselves into a hole. They keep on saying, that's okay. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm willing to accept the consequences. They've exterminated people for generations on this ship. And you're willing to accept these consequences. Excuse me? when all of this extermination starts, you're going to be singing the same tune? I don't think so.
And when you think about it like that, you truly understand the tragedy of this. Every single person was a valuable member of their family, a valuable member of their society, somebody who had something.
Well, excuse me, a valuable member of their community, a valuable member of their family. Where I'm sitting right now, Washington is only filled with deadbeats. The first headhunter I met with in 2009, a Latina woman, she said, I'll have a real hard time finding you a job because anybody looking at your resume is going to be afraid in 6 months you'll have their job. And I mean, the problem is with all of my research, my dissertation work, I mean, they give an honorary degree to Erica Kirk. Hillsdale College. I did one of the things on logic, Euclidean logic. Everybody should look at that one and take some, including everybody over at Hillsdale School. I agree. I came across that school and their curriculum a long time ago. In fact, I had the Euclidean logic. I love Euclid and algebra and geometry and all of that. I was considered very bizarre, particularly at Foxcroft. I mean, I love it. $20 million. The Mars sisters from Mars Candy have given to Foxcroft for their $65 million STEM wing for the snot-nosed brats that they got going to that school, that they're filling their heads with all sorts of delusions of grandeur. Ooh, this Titanic is going down, and everybody keeps on shuffling the chaise lounge. What do they call the lounge chairs on the Titanic? Like, let's who's going to get the best look at how we hit straight on into the iceberg? You know, there's some conspiracy theories about that as well. It was, that there was some wealthy heirs that went down on that, but there were some wealthy ones that didn't, and were notified. Like, mysteriously, they're not going to be taking that. Could be coincidence, could be something else. Who knows? I wouldn't put anything past these people. All of these, robber barons, imperialists on both sides of the Atlantic, they're not respectable people. Now, it was the job, and has been and is the job of the royalty to be going, not on my watch, but they're all too busy in their country club, jet setting around, trying to figure out who's going to pay their bills because their families went broke long ago. I mean, I've been telling King Charles since 2018, was my first letter to them, to Buckingham Palace. I don't know, it's like, they go after Prince Andrew, the Me Too bitches, New York courts. I keep on saying due process for everybody. And a 40-year-old man having sex with a 17-year-old is not a criminal offense. Even if it happened. So even if it happened, it's not a criminal offense. And everything else that they've attacked Prince Andrew on, for example, too much money to go to Davos. I'm like, that's not his fault. Go after, I've been telling you all for decades what the frick the UN, the World Bank, and the IMF are doing. They're taking all the taxpayers for a ride, just like all of the government that they're in bed with. I mean, this is party hardy season. And those international conferences, so all of them the frat boys with zipper problems can go and have their extramarital affairs in peace, and the wives won't find out. I mean, it's whoosh, makes your blood boil. Okay, so I got my blood boiling up right now, so I'll leave it for there. I was gonna take off my glasses the next time. Okay, so have a nice evening. Bye-bye.